Hello, listeners. Joe did a solo show while I was on vacation a couple of weeks ago. Now it's my turn. But instead of trying to come up with some kind of solo skit I could act out about a fantasy movie from 1988, I want to take this opportunity to tell Joe how much he means to me. Joe, you've been my friend for like a decade, and we built this podcast together. You're one of my favorite people on the planet. I love you to pieces. And I'm glad you got to take that vacation. You really deserved a break. I hope you find everything you're looking for in life. I love you, buddy. Welcome to Does This Still Work? The podcast that looks at old movies and asks, does this still work? I'm George Romaca, flying solo while my co-host Joe is in Mexico, and today I'm discussing Willow from 1988 and some historical context. First, podcasty stuff. We're excited to announce that we've joined the Creator Accountability Network. CAN is a nonprofit dedicated to reducing harassment and abuse through ethical education and a system of restorative accountability. We joined because we care about the safety and well-being of our community members. If you feel our behavior or content has harmed someone, please report it to CAN, either via the reporting form on their website, creatoraccountabilitynetwork.org, or via their hotline at 617-249-4255. They'll help us make it right and avoid repeating that mistake in the future. CAN also needs volunteers from our communities to help with their work, so if you have skills you think would be helpful, or time and a desire to help, please visit their website to find out how you can volunteer. Most importantly, get the word out to other creators who you think would be interested in getting credentialed. Help us build safer communities together. You can reach us at dtswpod@gmail.com, on Facebook, Letterboxd, and on our YouTube channel. Joe is on Blue Sky at joedixon.bsky.social. Please tell your friends about us, even and maybe especially the ones who are the best warriors in their village, and leave 5-star ratings everywhere. You can pick what we watch and get extra per episode content by funding us on Patreon for as little as $1 a month at patreon.com/dtswpod. Now I'm going to take us back to 1988.
And that's the way it was.
There's no 1988 real-world historical context for an evil queen putting children to death to avoid a prophecy, so that she'll have another 18 or so years of job security. There were 25 films in the fantasy genre released that year, including The Adventures of Baron Munchausen, the animated Alice in Wonderland, and Beetlejuice. Between Willow and those, they are all vastly different examples of what could be considered fantasy. And until this film, budgets for fantasy films were largely driven by needs for large sets, costumes, and practical effects. Willow being a George Lucas project, a whole technology had to be developed for it. There are a number of scenes where a magical transformation morphs a character from one animal to another until eventually transforming into their proper human form. Lucas's effects outfit, Industrial Light and Magic, created a computer program to generate the morphing sequence. At the time, this was groundbreaking, and ILM went to refine those techniques in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, Terminator 2 Judgment Day, and Star Trek VI The Undiscovered Country. Willow was directed by Ron Howard. I've seen his work in Backdraft, Apollo 13, How the Grinch Stole Christmas, A Beautiful Mind, Cinderella Man, and Solo, A Star Wars Story. This was written by George Lucas, and for the show we've seen his work in American Graffiti, and I've seen all of the Star Wars and Indiana Jones properties. And this was also written by Bob Dolman. And for the blurbs, IMDb says a young dwarf farmer is chosen to undertake a perilous journey in order to protect a special baby from an evil queen. Along the way, he teams up with a disgraced swordsman to defeat the evil sorceress. Okay, close enough. And YouTube says, from legendary filmmakers George Lucas and Ron Howard comes Willow, a timeless fantasy tale where heroes come in all sizes. When Willow Ufgood, Warwick Davis, finds an abandoned baby girl, he learns she is destined to end the reign of wicked Queen Bavmorda. Willow teams up with a rogue swordsman, Val Kilmer, to protect the child against darkness. Filled with magic and danger, Willow is the ultimate story of good versus evil. No. I don't like that last line, just no. So, Queen Bavmorda is played by Jean Marsh. And this sorceress queen used her black magic to take power and rules the Daikini, or normal-sized humans, with an iron fist. A prophet foretold the birth of a girl with a particular birthmark who would bring her downfall, so she's rounding up all the pregnant women in the realm. That child is born in her dungeon, but a midwife steals her away. Before long, Bavmorda sends devil dogs, or Rottweilers in rubber masks, after her. The midwife sends the child downriver on a raft of reeds a la Moses, and ends up getting killed. The child now born and missing, Bavmorda tasks her daughter, Sorsha, and her right-hand man, Kale, with finding her. Sorsha is played by Joanne Whaley, and Kale is played by Pat Roach, who I've seen in A Clockwork Orange, Clash of the Titans, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, Red Sonja, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, and Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. The baby floats downriver until it reaches a village of Nelwyn, all played by little people, and ends up in the care of a husband and father who's just trying to till his land against, like, the very Monsanto-ish Burgle-Cut, who we will introduce in a moment. Willow is played by Warwick Davis, and I've seen him in Star Wars Episode 6, Return of the Jedi, as Wicket the Ewok, and then he was in a bunch of other Star Wars stuff as other characters. I've also seen him in Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone and Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Parts 1 and 2, and The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, where he played Marvin, the depressed robot. At a festival, one of Bavmorda's hounds attacks. The Nelwyn warriors kill it and determine that if one came after the child, more are sure to follow. They throw together a band of Nelwyn to take the baby and give it to the first Daikini they find. That group includes the town's best warriors, Willow, and Burgle-Cut, the cowardly wealthy mayor, who is played by Mark Northover. The band travels until they find a Daikini in a cage. The band, except for Willow and his friend Migosh, decide that's good enough and fuck off. The man in the cage is Madmartigan, a skilled mercenary who has a bit of a problem not sleeping with other men's wives, and he's also a thief, which is how he ended up in a cage. Madmartigan is played by a very young Val Kilmer, and for the show we've seen him in Real Genius, Top Gun Maverick, and Bad Lieutenant Port of Call, New Orleans. And I've seen him in Tombstone, Batman Forever, and heard him in The Prince of Egypt. Before the Nelwyn release Madmartigan, a company of soldiers on their way to fight Bavmorda's armies show up. Their leader, Eric, is an old friend of Madmartigan's, but he thinks the merc needs to learn some discipline, so he leaves him in the cage. Eric is played by Gavin O'Harley, and I've seen him in Star Trek Voyager, one episode of it. The Nelwyn let Madmartigan out, give him the baby, and go their separate ways. But before long, the Nelwyn see the baby being carried by a bird being ridden by a brownie, or a race of palm-sized woodland folk. The Nelwyn chase the brownies into the woods and get captured before they're released on the orders of Cherylindria, the queen of the fairy folk, who recognizes the child and her importance. Cherylindria is played by Maria Hovo. She tells Willow the child's name, Elora Danon, and says that the child likes him and has chosen him as her guardian. She gives Willow her magic wand and tasks him with finding the sorceress Raziel, who will guide him to the kingdom of Tir Asleen, where he'll find the help he needs to face Bavmorda. In the morning, he sends his buddy Migosh back to the village. Then he's joined up with by two brownies, the film's comic relief duo. Frangine is played by Rick Overton, and for the show we've seen him in Earth Girls Are Easy, and I've seen him in Beverly Hills Cop, Groundhog Day, Mrs. Doubtfire, and A Futile and Stupid Gesture. Rule is played by Kevin Pollak, and I've seen him in She's All That and The Whole Nine Yards. Willow and the brownies go to a nearby Daikini village where they find Madmartigan hiding in drag from the husband of his latest lover. Before long, Sorsha and Kale show up. Madmartigan uses the angry husband to sow some chaos so that he, Willow, Alorna, and the brownies can escape. They manage to find Raziel, who's been turned into a marmot of some kind by Bavmora's magic. Raziel is played by Patricia Hayes, and I've seen her in The Neverending Story. Sorsha and Kale show up and capture everybody but the brownies. While confined, Willow tries to use the magic wand under Raziel's guidance to turn her back into a human, but only succeeds in changing her into a raven. Why Sorsha and Bavmora's troops wouldn't have searched and taken anything that looked remotely dangerous or weapon or magic-y from him? I can't answer that question. The brownies show up and pick the locks, but not before blowing some brownie love potion dust in Madmartigan's face. He ends up almost seducing Sorsha before they all make their escape. They end up at another Dakini village, where they run into Eric and explain their situation. When Sorsha and Kale show up, Madmartigan takes her hostage and they escape again. The sexual tension between them builds, but she gets away before too long. The party reaches Tir Asleen, the inhabitants all having been entombed in ice by Bavmorda some time ago, with trolls now skulking about. Willow tries to use the wand on Raziel again, this time turning her into a goat. Madmartigan goes home alone and booby-traps the shit out of the place before Kale and Sorsha show up. He manages to hold off their entire army, with a little help from Willow accidentally turning a troll into a two-headed dragon. Sorsha watches Madmartigan in action and is smitten. The brownies bring Eric's army for reinforcements, but Kale is able to abscond with Elora Danan. So the good guys come up with a plan to storm Bavmorda's castle, but she turns them all into pigs except for Raziel, who's already a goat, and Willow, who manages to cast a protective spell on himself. Willow tries one final time to return Raziel to human form, and this is the sequence that ILM broke technological ground on, doing a smooth morphing transition from a goat to an ostrich to a tortoise to a tiger, and finally to Raziel's human form as an old lady. Raziel turns all the pigs back into humans, and they come up with a plan. All through the night, Bavmorda works a ritual to not only kill Elora Danan, but banish her spirit to the Netherworld so she can never be born again. Or something. Basically, the good guys trick the bad guys into opening the castle. Once inside, more fighting and magic happen until Bavmorda manages to destroy herself. Everyone lived happily ever after, the end. I mean, except for Bavmorda. She dies. The prophecy angle in this is slightly interesting, in that it's not that Elora Danan grows up to overthrow or depose or destroy Bavmorda, but the fact of her birth being prophesied scares the shit out of Bavmorda so much that she ends up nuking herself trying to kill the baby. Nifty little bit of writing. Does the film work? If you don't think too hard about it, probably. The effects are dated. The morphing sequence broke ground for 1988, but it is far overshadowed by what we can do now with CGI. But as far as a basic fantasy, like if you don't want to sit and watch all 36 hours of The Lord of the Rings or however long it is, you can get your fantasy fix in 2 hours with Willow. It's good for that much, at least. So sure, it still works. This is a super short episode, people. It's difficult when you don't have somebody to bounce shit off of. So, next week, Joe will be back, and we'll be talking about Night of the Living Dead from 1968 because it'll be our Halloween episode, which means our episode that will release closest to Halloween by Price is Right rules, meaning before Halloween but not going over. So, I'm George Romacka. Thanks for listening. Indeed, because if a podcast drops and there's no one around to hear it, it's just another collection of ones and zeros that doesn't matter.
You've been listening to Does This Still Work? Produced by Joe Dixon and George Romacka.
This content is CAN credentialed, which means you can report instances of harassment, abuse, or other harm on their hotline at 617-249-4255 or on their website at creatoraccountabilitynetwork.org.
The hosts can be reached via social media, email, or the contact page at dtswpod.com. Be good to yourself and others, because that still works.
Please tell your friends about us. Oh fuck, I had this a second ago. So, from no stupid questions, surely people who speak in tongues know they're bullshitting, right? From stupid questions, why is science so underpaid but engineering isn't? Random question, what song is stuck in your head right now? Back to no stupid questions, do most adults just not really have friends? From stupid questions, do I use a washcloth in the shower? And random question, what color underwear do you wear most?